I am so lucky I didn't relapse and die in that
Mhm.
5 year interim because so many people who don't establish a sense of safety inside of this idea of powerlessness, which is really another way of saying surrender. I surrender what doesn't belong to me
Mhm.
and I focus on what does.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast. I'm your friendly orthopedic spine and integrative health specialist, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi. We have an amazing guest for you guys today. Dr. Samantha Harte will be joining us on the program. I had the honor and privilege of meeting her at an Aspire Tour conference here in Minneapolis, and I was absolutely blown away by her story and what she is doing to make the world a better place. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a licensed doctor of physical therapy, best-selling author, public speaker, choreographer, performing artist, podcast host, and sober mother of two. Her professional journey is rooted in her passion for helping others overcome physical challenges and reclaim their independence, which evolved into a broader advocacy for mental and emotional healing. She's been featured in prominent media outlets like People Magazine, Time, ABC, CBS, where she shares her personal story of resilience through trauma, loss, addiction, and recovery. Through a trauma-informed lens, she has reimagined the traditional 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous into a modern, accessible framework applicable to anybody facing adversity, not just addicts, emphasizing hope, resilience, and joy. Her book, amazing one, is called Breaking the Circuit, 12 Steps to Joy After Adversity. And it serves as a practical roadmap for navigating dysfunction, depression, and societal difficulties. She draws from her own experiences to inspire transformation and healing. As a speaker and podcast host, she focuses on redefining recovery, blending creativity, wellness, and evidence-based insights to address contemporary issues like widespread mental health struggles. You guys ready? Let's get after it. I actually met Dr. Harte at a conference here in my wonderful state of Minnesota. A really, really inspiring, conference, and got to meet a lot of incredible people. And just had the fortune of being, next to Dr. Harte. I never know where my next podcast guest is going to come from, but it's on this show. It's all about, the most interesting people, the people that are most tied into what's going on in the world that can help you guys, get to the next level here on, Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast. And I think the reason that not only does when I speak to Dr. Harte, not only did I feel like I was getting just kind of a private therapy session because she has been through so much. I mean, you really have been through so much in your own life. But I think that the reason that this particular episode is so timely is because there is so much sadness in the world. There's so much depression. So many people feel lost. You talk so much about addiction. People just really don't have a center. They can't like find their way. And I see so many of them as a physician, whether as a spine surgeon or integrative health guy. I just people are really, really struggling. So number one, thank you for doing what you're doing because you're going to help millions of people to get out of the dark. And people, I mean, we as human, we can get into such dark spaces. Finding the light is really, really, difficult. And in your book, breaking the circuit. I mean, you just kind of come out with it. You just say, here's what I went through. Here are all these raw stories. And I looked at all these reviews of your book. I mean, first of all, congratulations, amazing book. But people were just like, it's so raw, it's so real, and I think that's really good. It's going to attract so many people to to you. So I think that the best way, to get started is almost to go backwards. I mean, not right now, like you're out there. I mean, you've got your own podcast, you're about to hit 100 episodes, you're on the circuit, you're speaking, people are coming to see you. It's just amazing. How did you get here from the depths?
It's so interesting how these conversations kick off and what memory comes to mind first. And what I'll say in response, because it'll be an answer, is it's no surprise to me now, and it would have been 3 years ago, that I find myself back on stages with a microphone in my hand. Because from a very young age, I loved the stage and performance and putting on a show. However, who I was back then was an empty vessel, and I needed the praise and adoration of the outside world to feel safe and whole inside. And it is this unbelievable full circle moment of being face down in a pit of despair so many times and figuring out through a combination of utter resilience, a little bit of luck and timing, a lot of divine intervention, and extremely hard work, how to find my way back into a space of hope and joy and ultimately purpose, that I now find myself on stages being whole inside and not needing any of the external validation. I want the stage because I want the impact that it provides. I want a one to many reach. I want to give people a spiritual framework because it's the stuff that saved my life, but I don't need it to be okay. So way back when the dream was, I want a record deal. I want to sing and dance all over the world. It's what lights me up. And really, when I think about it now, dancing more than singing, it brought me into a sense of radical presence that I was absolutely incapable of achieving without that. So what everything else looked like was an unrelenting sense of anxiety because everything had to be perfect all the time, and a super unstable, dysfunctional childhood with a mother who abused prescription pills and had a raging, untreated eating disorder and mental illness, and a father who enabled the whole thing, but mostly lived in denial. And then two young girls, my sister and I, just acting out. And some of the ways I acted out were by trying to be perfect, and other ways were sneaking out, doing drugs, all the things that kids, especially in those circumstances, might do. And for a very long time, it didn't really seem like much of anything at all. It didn't seem abnormal what was going on in my house. My mom was cheating on my dad. Nothing seemed strange until I went away to college. And then I started to question sort of what I was exposed to. But I went to school because my mother's word in my house was God. My mother said, there's no such thing as a higher power, by the way. If you're a person who believes in that, you're a fool. And the only person you can count on is yourself. And also make sure to get your degree because no one can take it from you. She was so financially insecure. And so I was such a good student, especially as an untreated perfectionist, that I relished the academic environment because it was so curated and controlled, right? It was like an if this, then that equation. If I study hard enough, then I'll get the good grades. If I get the good grades, then I will eventually graduate, maybe top a class, and that will surely lead me to a career and a stable financial future. And that's what mom said I should go get. So even though I had this innate, pure desire to be on a stage, I didn't have the support or the internal bandwidth to tolerate what came with that level of rejection and uncertainty. So school was the safety net. And there's so much to unpack, but if I were to fast forward, like, what did this period look like? I actually got kicked out of Boston University because of plagiarism. I had never plagiarized a day in my life until I got this one teacher at BU who was giving me C's. And a C to me was like a
Mm.
death sentence. I was a fucking straight A student. And instead of asking for help, getting a tutor, expressing the anxiety that was coming up in not being perfect, and any number of things that I could have done if I had had that framework available, I cheated. I referenced a paper that I thought was fantastic online, didn't cite the sources. Don't remember, to be honest with you, consciously going, I'm cheating on this so I can get a better grade. I don't remember making this, but I hand the paper in and I get a 0. And he said to me, which is so ironic now because I'm a, best-selling author, however many years later, but he looked at me and said, I was wondering why this paper was so much better than all of your other papers. And I realize it's because it's not your work. And I'm going to report this to the committee and they will decide what to do with you. And the academic committee decided to give me an 18-month suspension, which was just a notch below being expelled, which would have been on my permanent record forever. A suspension is not a permanent record. The idea that I could be let back into the university as a first semester junior, while all my friends would be second semester seniors about to graduate, was unimaginable to me. The level of, I say this because of so many things. This was one of the launching pads of an extremely dark period. While I had dabbled in drugs and alcohol before then and had been overexposed to it between my mother, my father's enabling, and my sister's own experiment with drug use, I came to New York City after this, made up a story in my head that I would then tell everyone for many, many years later that I left college to finally pursue my dream to become a star, which is what I always wanted to do anyway. Mom, so fuck you, watch me fly. And what does a young girl who moves to Manhattan do to earn a living? She becomes a bartender. What does a young girl who is hyper exposed to drugs and alcohol and feels terrible about who she is and deeply ashamed of this massive thing that happened at the university do? She drinks a lot. And if somebody has something else besides a drink, she tries it
Mm.
because she doesn't think she's going to lose control because she's a perfectionist and she knows how to keep everything neat and orderly. So within a couple years, I was overdosing on cocaine. I mean, it was like a rocket ship into active addiction. And it took me a really long time to understand that incident at Boston University, while I don't believe it's the thing, that made me an addict, it had a big part to play with the timeline of my addiction, for sure. And there was already so much shame I was carrying, so much self-abandonment from the earliest I could remember. And now it was tumbleweeding into the thing that happened at BU and all the demoralizing decisions that people make in active addiction. And of course, there was a guy at the time that I was in love with and dating who I cheated on relentlessly again and again. And he was such a good codependent. He stayed with me over and over and over. And so all this stuff is going on in my personal life, but I have this crazy scare with cocaine and it spooked the shit out of me. Not in the sense that I had some deep soul work to do to really change my life, but in the sense that I was losing control over substances. Yeah, I needed to check out one of those meetings that people used to talk about, that there was only one guy in my whole life that I knew who was sober and maybe he could take me to one. So I'll never forget, calling this guy Bobby and being like, so I think you're the only one I can tell this to. I overdosed and I'm fucking terrified. And he's like, let's go to a meeting. He was so amazing. He was so non-judgmental, and we went to a meeting and I sat in the back of those fucking 12-step rooms and was like, nope, absolutely not. Like, I don't look like you. I don't drink like you. I have so many things. I have a boyfriend. I was now in graduate school getting a doctorate.
Mm.
Like, absolutely not. Not to mention, the language of God was so thick and it felt so suffocating. And I hadn't done anything really to dismantle my mother's ideology of God up until this moment. So I was carrying that on my back, right? So this was a huge threat to my identity. The 12 steps, as they were laid out at the time, I didn't understand it then, were a threat to my sense of safety. Because what kept me safe was to not believe in God. What kept me safe was to always be in control. not to turn my will over to something that I couldn't see or know,
Mhm.
to be called crazy when in fact I was doing what I needed to do to survive and what had gotten me as far as it had. So I had a big middle finger up to the 12-step program for a while. And, that took its toll. And I did what addicts do and cut and pasted my drinking and using for a long, long time until that jig was up. And I remember the guy I was dating was like, yeah, the fact that you're still doing this shit, I just knew he was out the door. And he was sort of the only proof left at that point that I was worth anything at all. So I thought I better go back to one of those meetings. And for whatever reason, I stayed. That was the beginning of my sober journey, which was in 2009. So here I am in graduate school, getting sober, still dating the guy I cheated on, but for years. You ask about going from darkness to light.
Mhm.
Really, that framework is very intriguing because it can mean so many things, right? It's on an energetic level, going from shame to deep sense of self-worth, going from godless to deep communion with God, going from control to surrender, going from betrayal to forgiveness. I mean, the framework of dark to light and the iterations of that I have gone through are so extensive that I could go on and on about it. But what I can say is that it would still be 5 more years from entering the program before the dark got so dark that the light seeped in. And we can get to that, but I mean, I imagine you have questions. So there's like a ton more to tell you, but we can just hit the pause button and say that's the beginning part of the
Yeah,
story.
I mean, I think again, I think our, I mean, it's you tell your story in such like really that word raw. It's true. We can only because it's just a deep honesty. We just have to be honest for where we are. And I see it so much, not just in like my personal life where I just talk to people and people think just because I'm a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but people, kind of use me in that way too, because they just want to tell me all these things. But definitely, with my patients, this really not admit, like just it took you a while to really admit where you were. I mean, your perfectionism was clearly a major barrier. I mean, I listen, I can definitely sympathize with that, not only in myself, but if you think about it, I'm a surgeon. Think about how many of my colleagues are perfectionist number one, and just think about how many physicians struggle with mental health so badly. And a lot of it is perfectionism and this loss of control and it just and any of us and the thoughts I had as you're telling that story is and we've all been to dark places. I've certainly have been through dark places. It's just very difficult getting to like being a surgeon and going through all this stuff, and then personal stuff gets intertwined, and then you have to take care of patients, and then their lives get intertwined with your life. But the truth is that we could all have ended up down that dark path, and so I know there's a lot of and you talk about this, but there's a lot of people still want to stigmatize people that get into situations where they're addictive. But I can tell you, I see people that I've known for a long time, whether patients or people that I know, have slipped into addiction. In a million, no one would ever guess, right? The people that look like they have perfect lives, everything's perfect. Next thing you know, you're like, hey, where's Sam? Where's Tony? Where's Agatha? Gone. They're gone. They're in some place or something even worse, right? Because a lot of people end up like they don't survive the thing because they go down that. And so yeah, I just it's so refreshing, your honesty, just the way you can, and you have no problem talking about it. And that's why I think obviously that's why the big stage is for you, and that's why so many people are talking, because they want to feel the pain. They're feeling the pain when you talk to your audience, right? They're feeling that same thing. They're like, yeah, okay, I didn't plagiarize a paper, but maybe they said, oh, it was this one thing I did. I was going to win the championship, and then I struck out, and that like ruined my life, and it just spiraled into next thing, and then I started doing drugs, and then blah blah blah. But I think that since we have sort of limited time, I think that the take home from some of that is this your chapter one is this powerlessness. We have to admit that this stuff can happen to us at any time, and what are the ways that we can, obviously you're trying to help people come out of these things, but you're also trying to prevent people from ever going into those dark holes. So just admitting that we're powerless, that's something I've come to that clear realization. Because, right, we see trauma, like you're powerless. Like you don't know if you're going to get up one day and then end up having both of your legs amputated and in an ICU for 4. We just don't know. And that feeling of powerlessness, it's just the human condition. It's just, that's what we have to deal with. So can you talk about kind of giving in to the, like, this concept of that we are powerless, but it's okay. And that's why it's so important to have something to center on, have something, we're both David Goggins fans. We had this conversation. Everybody that watch it, they know my David Goggins stuff. But anyway, it's like that other thing. It's like when he talks, he's a big, believer in God. But he's like, I don't care if you believe in God or the universe or whatever. He's like, you have to believe in something. Because if you don't believe, like when we say, hey, you got to believe in yourself, I don't even know what that means. That doesn't mean anything, because we do have to, like, let ourselves flow into the Oprah says it, right, the source or whatever. So those two concepts is basically your first kind of 2 chapters in your book. It's like the powerlessness, and then why it's so amazing to allow ourselves to believe in something bigger than ourselves, and how that can let us feel at least less powerless, or at least there's something there for us when we get into those situations. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, just as a reference for the readers, the book that is out, which came out last year, is a modern and trauma
Mhm.
informed
Yes.
of the 12 steps. And the reason partly for me doing that is because that is ultimately what saved my life in recovery. Because for 5 years, I was struggling with this man that was the boyfriend who I stayed with and cheated on, who shouldn't have stayed with me, who then proposed to me and married me, and had such a seething pile of resentment that he ended up getting into his own extramarital affair that was extensive and severe, and an insane part of my early
Mhm.
sobriety. You have to get the book to really hear the whole story, because it's just so much. It's its own episode. But what happened to me in that time, because I was faithless in AA and I was obsessed with trying to access
Mhm.
power over people, places,
Mhm.
things, situations, because I always had been able to.
Mhm.
And I was like, surely this is no different. Surely there is something I can say or do to change this man's mind and make him love and forgive me
Mhm.
again. Because if I can do that, then I'm okay.
Mhm.
Then I'm somebody. And I needed that to happen for the 2 years it happened. I needed to come undone and have my entire identity that was wrapped around controlling others collapse in order to access real power. So I finally hit actual spiritual rock bottom, not in my cocaine overdose, but 5 years in sobriety in a marital crisis. A woman comes into my life and says, let's do the steps on your marriage. So instead of focusing on powerlessness over drugs and alcohol, which you are clear that you are powerless over, let's focus on other things, real life things. So if it's the child that is totally disobedient, no matter how good of a parent you're trying to be. If it's the boss that's micromanaging you, no
Mhm.
matter how good of a worker you are. If
Mhm.
it's the spouse who you're pretty sure is still really angry at you from something from 5 years ago, who refuses to forgive you, there are things always in our adult lives, in our lives period, that we're going to have no ability to control. And so this thing about perfectionism, which is so funny and insidious, is that culturally, we are so rewarded for being perfect,
Yes.
for being
Yes.
good and great and the best and the smartest. And as a surgeon, as a medical practitioner, it is to your benefit.
Mhm.
Be obsessed with controlling the outcome, because you might save a fucking life. But
Boom.
spiritually,
Yep.
in matters of the heart, perfectionism collapses. And nobody taught me that. And I was relying on that coping mechanism for a sense of safety. But it was actually so unbelievably dangerous. I was in a state of rage and anxiety for those 2 years. That's hard to capture. I am so lucky I didn't relapse and die in that
Mhm.
5 year interim because so many people who don't establish a sense of safety inside of this idea of powerlessness, which is really another way of saying surrender. I surrender what doesn't belong to me
Mhm.
and I focus on what does. Because in the modern version of step one, it's not I'm powerless, so poor me. I'm powerless, so this is why this happened to me. I'm powerless, so I have no control and I can't. No, it's a full blown, I'm out of denial. I'm baked in reality. And I'm being rigorously honest about all the things in my life I've been trying to death grip that are now harming me. And I am saying out loud, I have the courage to release them just for today. And what I'm going to do in that release is take those hands that I've opened because I've let that go and I'm going to turn them back onto myself and I'm going to ask myself, what can I do now? What can I do differently? What can I do more of, less of, better? Who can I become in the wake of understanding that they are not my job to fix or change? That's what, so it's much more than just I am powerless over. It's so that we can gain a deep sense of sovereignty over what we do have power over. And that was the beginning of this new framework of the 12 steps and what I understood to be an absolute life raft that was unrelated to anything religious, that had everything to do with a framework that I never had as a kid, that
Mhm.
I desperately needed because the human experience is baked in uncertainty. And if I'm going to stay a hardwired perfectionist, I'm in deep shit.
Yes.
Because what about betrayal? And what about heartbreak?
Mhm.
And what about and financial insecurity and grief? What the fuck am I going to do when that shows up? All those things that are part of
Mhm.
life that I
Yes.
cannot control. What am I going to do? I had better figure out a container that I can fit safely inside of that
Mhm.
can access when shit hits the fan,
Mhm.
or I'm not going to make it. Or I'll make it on the outside, like so many people do. I have all the things, and I feel like an empty vessel. And so this new version of working through the steps was a radical experience, particularly when I got to the ninth step, because if you're listening and you're a doctor, or a high achiever,
Yep.
you probably have a voice in your head that's turned up real loud that says, not fucking good enough. Try it again.
Correct.
Not fit enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough. When are you going to get the fucking promotion? When are you going to settle down? What's the next big move? Hustler. That person has a 9 figure brand. You're only at 7. There is an unrelenting inner critic inside of many of us, maybe all of us. And for the perfectionist who's unrecovered, it is the loudest voice
Mhm.
until we rewire that experience and we come to understand it as just a part of us that can serve us at the highest level in certain areas, but that with matters of the heart, it needs to be listened to, heard, and understood, not believed entirely and blindly, because I believed everything she said, or anesthetized, because boy, did I try that too. It's
Mhm.
a part of us that has to be met with compassionate curiosity. And in this dark period in the marital crisis, I got a question from my then sponsor that changed the way I thought about the way I spoke to myself forever. She said, we're at the ninth step, which is making an amends, and here I am dreading it. Dreading. How many amends have I made in 5 years sober, especially to my husband who I cheated on, who's still angry at me? I'm thinking, how many times can I say I'm sorry to this
Mhm.
man? How long can I feel ashamed for what I did? And she said, no, no, no. Have you ever made an amends to yourself? And I was like, excuse me? It was a brand new concept. I was 30 years old with a doctorate, with a job and a marriage that looked good on the outside and was collapsing. I was sober but spiritually bankrupt. Why? Because in part, the shame I was carrying from the decades of stuff,
Mhm.
from the choices in active addiction, was haunting me in my sobriety and telling me, this is what you fucking get for
Mm,
what you did. I was so soul sick that it did not matter what I had on the outside because I didn't feel lovable. And
mm,
when this woman said that to me, she gave me permission to consider speaking to myself in a new way. She gave me permission to separate myself, my true self, from this part that was beating me into submission, which meant that if I was separate from the critic, the self lacerator, and that part of me deserved love and forgiveness,
mm,
then she might have a different way of speaking to me than the voice that's been inside my head my whole life. So if that's true or possible, I might need to then become hyper conscious. This is the beginning of work, is consciousness, waking up. Why pain is a circuit breaker. I don't want people to be in pain and crisis every time they have a spiritual awakening, but it is often the case because we're on autopilot, even with these coping behaviors. We're on autopilot, we're asleep at the wheel of our lives. And pain wakes us up from a sleeping state. I was zapped into a state of consciousness such that I started to pay attention to the voice inside my head. And every time she spoke, I went, wait a minute, wait a minute. It's you again, inner
mm,
critic. You're
mm,
about to tell me that this shitty marital situation is what I get for what I did. But if I believe you, that means that I'm unforgiven, that I'm not a woman who's worthy of a loving marriage. And I'm not sure that's actually true anymore because this woman told me that maybe I deserve something better. And there is a part of me that kind of feels like there's probably something much more beautiful than this. So if I don't want to believe you, I know why you're here. I honor you for your years of service and how much you've protected me, but you're really hurting me right now. So I'm going to hear you out, but I'm going to speak to myself differently. I'm going to think about what a woman who loves and forgives herself would say in this moment, Step. And then I literally had to think about what that would be. And then I had to practice saying it. So
mm,
whatever would intuitively come to me to say instead of, this is what you fucking get, Sam. For example, maybe it was something like, wow, this is so hard. This is so, so painful. And you really want to not feel these feelings. You really want to blame yourself right now because it feels like a type of control. If only, you had done something differently, then it wouldn't look like this. But the truth is, it's just hard and it's sad and it's going to get better. You
mm,
deserve for it to get better and it's going to get better. You just don't know how or when. And then I would have to say it every time I'd want to fall back into this is what you get. It's going to get
mm.
better. I just
Yes.
don't know how and when. It's going to get better. I just don't know how and when. And that was the beginning of breaking the feedback loop of self-criticism and rewiring into this new space of a more compassionate self-talk. So this is the part of the container under which I started to heal. And it's a framework I've used in conjunction with all kinds of personal development tools, all kinds of coaching, all kinds of therapy, again and again and again. So I'm 16 and a half years sober, right? So 11 and a half years as I have traversed many, many very difficult things. That container of a more trauma informed 12-step process has been there for me as a point of access to free myself from suffering, right? We suffer when we death grip. We suffer when we obsess and ruminate. We suffer when we're terrified of when the next check is coming in. There's
Mhm.
so much suffering that nobody gave us tools for. And I saw it in my clinic because, within a few years of being a PT, I was
Mm.
like, well, this ain't it either. This ain't it, having all this debt and making no money and building
Yes.
someone else's dream.
Yes.
So in the marital crisis, in this discovery of self, I started to hear this intuitive voice that had been silent since I was 4 when I questioned my mother's abuse of prescription pills and she shut that shit down. This part of me showed up and said, you should start your own business. I was like, huh? I'm thinking, who's this voice? This is a very different side of me. She said, I think your favorite color is blue. That blue over there, because I was living in an apartment by myself in the marital crisis. We were really not doing well. And so I signed this lease and I had to discover who the fuck I was, all the way down to favorite color, sobbing at night trying to put myself to sleep and realizing I never even learned how to do that by myself, wrapping my arms around myself for the first time as a grown up, and all the way to you should start your own business.
Mm,
I started to honor the call of my intuition,
mm,
and I saw some wins and I was like, wow, it's actually possible to be so much more successful with a sense of ease and surrender than it ever was to stranglehold the world around me. That's the thing about perfectionism, and I'll give you like an example. There's a step in the 12-step framework that's about what they call character defects, right? And I think that's very, very antiquated, right? Like there's parts of us that are defective, right?
yeah, it's just the way. I mean, it's just the way. I mean, if you're gonna call character defects, we all have serious character defects. Sorry to. I mean, we're all so flawed. That's why when my patients self-flagellate right in front of me, right, they're just there whipping themselves. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I just met you. Let's talk positive. What are we trying to do? But if we just, I mean, if you think that somebody's life that you see on their Instagram page or face or whatever is actually their life. No, we're all the same. Whether you're a professional athlete, right? We were at that conference. Like, think about how successful some of those people were on the stage. You talk about demons, character flaws, this and that. It's talking about our character flaws is awesome so that we all understand that we're human and we have a lot of issues. Sorry.
Yes, there's like,
Yeah.
even though I'm talking about spirituality, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I'm
Yeah.
saying spiritual
Yeah.
framework, spiritual framework. There's also something so unbelievably tactical about this.
Mm,
And so here's what I mean by that, right? The traditional step 7 is this idea that, we're gonna write down all our character defects and then ask God to remove them, right? So that it feels ancient when I think of it that way. Now, the reframe of that's applicable to anybody,
mhm.
not just a substance abuser, but to the human
Right.
experience, is we all have character traits. It's what makes us who we are.
Yes.
And any of them at any moment can either be an asset or a liability. And the question becomes, if we're interested in our own evolution, when are these parts of me assets? When is my perfectionism an asset? Well, I'm a super high achiever. I want a lot from my life. I like to do things really well. I check my work again and again. I am super good with time management. I can multitask really well. Wow, there's so much about this quality that's incredible. And also, can I become so conscious of when I cross that invisible line where now I'm in rumination and
Mhm.
obsession and I'm getting so scared of the outcome and not knowing what to expect that I'm hyper controlling.
Mhm.
Am I being perfect to avoid the messy middle so I'm not actually being seen because vulnerability is scaring me so much? And can I become so clear about this very beautiful, more expansive view of
Mhm.
this part of who I am so that I can once again, when I start to realize I'm sliding back into a lack of safety. I don't feel safe inside. So now I'm hyper
Mhm.
controlling and I'm
Yes.
micromanaging and I'm trying to control the people, places, and things that because I don't feel safe
Mhm.
inside. How do I restore myself to a sense of safety inside so that I can go, I trust what's happening. I did everything in my power that I could do. I'm going to release the outcome because it's not up to me. I'm going to redirect my God-given gift into where it is an asset. Every one of us could benefit right now when we get off this episode of writing down 3 character traits
Mhm.
we have and then delineating what about them are assets and what about them can be
Mm.
liabilities. And can we distinguish the presentation, the physiologic feeling in our
Yes.
body when we're in the asset version versus the liability? And then how do we course correct out of that? How do we shift from a liability to an asset? A lot of the time it's in the aftermath. It's after we've acted out, it's after we've been reactive that we go, oh, I did that thing again. It was because I was afraid. It was, I didn't feel, I felt threatened. And, for the addict, it's just an extreme version of feeling
Mhm.
so threatened on the inside. We feel so unsafe that drugs and alcohol in the beginning make us feel safe. So now when we put the drugs and alcohol down, we're learning how to exist like all the other humans on this earth are. We're constantly in this feeling of threat of I'm sending my child out into the world. What's going to happen to
Yes.
them?
Yes.
Am I going to lose my job? Threat of,
Yep.
as an entrepreneur, how am I going to meet my overhead expenses? And if we act out on those threats, those beautiful character traits will become liabilities. And these can be the things that, as they accumulate untreated, can really create fractures in our connection, not just to self, which is the most important, to highest self, because we're living in the fear, but connection to the people around us. And at the end of the day, I've never met a person whose money could cure their heartbreak.
Absolutely 100% does not cure heartbreak in any way. We can, I mean, story after story.
So you can have all the things, but you've got to
Yes.
be inside. You've got to be able to restore yourself to a sense of safety so you can function as your best, so that you hit your head on the pillow at the end of every 24 hours and at the end of your life and are fucking proud of
Mhm.
who you were and how you lived.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about reframing. I think that especially, a lot of us that go into these really high pressure, high into like just it just it's wild. Like I love telling stories about medical school, the level of competition and what you and just reframing it. And I think that what did it for me, in my life, and I'm always working on something because I am a it's just all the stuff you talk about, I'm 100% in that category, and it's really bad at times. I mean, it's really hard to control the perfectionism, but you're right. You have to use it for what it's good for. Like perfectionism is good for stuff. Being perfectionist with your kids is usually a bad idea because then you're trying to like take your worldview, fit them into it, and anytime they come out of it, it's horrible. But reframing it for me has meant going from, like kind of doing it for others, or doing it for what I felt like people expected of me, which makes us even more like, because so many people like are in medical school or in law school or in whatever they're doing, business school. A lot of that is pressure from the outside. What do my parents think of me? What do my friends think of me? What is my persona? I've completely shit. You know what my mentality is now? I'm so dedicated just to helping people get better. But from my own thing, I'm just like, we have one life. We're all going to be 6 feet under in no time at all, actually. So why not do the best thing that we can do is just carry our burdens and try to be the best people we can be and just make the world better. Because what else, Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. Because what else the hell do we have to do? Otherwise, we're just going to suffer because life is, otherwise, it's just all suffering, right?
Yep.
It's all suffer. It sucks. We're going to die. We're going to get sick. Our loved ones are going to get sick, whatever. So all we can do is do the best with what we have with this present moment, bring us out of that, try to just, admit our faults, our everything that is kind of wrong with us, and just like you say, just like surrender to it, talk to ourselves, try to have that kind voice instead of that annoying voice that's always telling us how horrible of a person, we are, and then trying to make the most of it. One other thing that I wanted to just bring up, because I think that when people, and we'll talk, we'll kind of end it, in just a couple minutes here on your book and where they can find it and how they can order it, and everyone should get your book. But I think that the thing that people have to understand, because we've talked a lot about addiction and you've talked about your own personal addiction to drugs and stuff like that. Forget about, I mean, that is a huge problem. And obviously I see it. Forget about that. What about the addictions to everything else? Because a lot of people fall into the other addictions, which may not be drugs. First of all, like social media addiction in today's environment is pervasive. It's devastating, right? And then we're just talking about gambling addiction, sex addiction, food addiction, right? We deal with a lot of that stuff. But those people are, everything's the same. The same parts of the brain are activated. Those same epigenetics that, gets activated to become an alcoholic or do drugs is the same thing that makes you scroll on cat videos for 19 hours in a row because you don't want to deal with the fact that you're feeling a certain way about the world, or you're down, or whatever it is. So I want people to understand that this book and just everything you talk about doesn't just apply to that. It really just applies to the way that we see ourselves and the way we're able to tackle the world, because it's never been harder in human history to be a human. There's too much stimulation. There's too many things going on, and it really is ruining a lot of people. And following people like you and just listening to your story and the way that's why I wanted to start with coming out of the darkness and into the light. A lot of people are in a really dark place on social media, a really dark place on gambling, a really dark, and they don't know why. They don't know why they're slipping in, and they're just going further and further down. So coming out of that is, I think, something that your book just lays it out. If they follow these 12 steps, it's a guide you didn't have. It's a guide I
Yep.
didn't have. But here we are.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, it's my life's work right now to be the girl that, quote unquote, 12 step the world. And I say
Yeah.
world because I'm talking about addicts and non-addicts, because
Right.
just,
Right.
and much like your own experience, running a private practice for 10 years, all I saw
Hmm.
was, and it was so much bigger and deeper than chronic
Hmm.
back pain and rotator cuff tears and disc bulges. It was a soul sickness.
Yes.
It was suffering from being addicted to people pleasing, denial,
Yes.
hyper productivity, fitness. These addictions were not much different once all the addicts in these 12-step rooms put the substances down. It was eerily similar to what my patients presented with.
Hmm.
And I thought, first of all, if I don't treat this part of it, then I'm really not doing my job. And second of all, these people don't have a framework. And so why should addicts be given this framework when it belongs to the human condition?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
it needs a freshening up. I mean, good Lord, the steps
Yes.
were written in 1935. The success rate of AA is extremely low. And so this idea that there, in today's world especially, there is so much instant gratification at literally at our fingertips that even when things are really, really good, we could just bypass the 2-minute cry, the
Hmm.
long walk, the soaking of the sun that is actually required for our bodies to get what it really needs to be all right. And enough of those bypasses turns into chronic inflammation, turns into
Yes.
numbing,
Hmm.
turns into disconnection from self and the people around us, and eventually can become a crisis of all sorts. And so, yeah, the hope is that this or something like it, this or something better, can become accessible. Because what is it going to take for us to stop choosing the wrong hard? As an adult, there is almost no decision that is easy or hard. Most decisions are two types of hard. Which hard are you going to choose?
Hmm.
Are you going to choose this is going to be hard right now? It's going to be hard to feel it. It's going to be hard to do it. But in the long run, I will have kept the promises I made to myself. I will have added to the foundation of self-worth. I will have done something that gives me a swell of pride. I will have broken the generational trauma that is my lineage. Or are we going to choose oh, fuck it, not today? And enough of those days where it's going to be easy now, but it's going to be real hard later. Hard on your body, hard on your friendships, hard in your romantic life, hard in your career, and hard in your fucking soul, because you can't lie to that. So choose your heart. I
Yeah.
want us to be able to
Love it.
choose the right heart.
No, I love it. And I think when you're weighing, two decisions, like go one road or the other, I think it just goes in that theme, and people talk about this all the time. It's like usually we're going to regret something or another, right? Like like choosing the harder thing or whatever. The question is, if you really think it out and play it out over a long period of time, which are you really going to regret more? Like in your case, think about how much you would regret if you didn't go for it, if you didn't go for getting on the stage and writing the book and doing all those other things because you chose the easy at the moment. Usually choosing easy, all it's doing is for that moment, it's easier. That's it. That's all it doesn't do anything. It doesn't, you're not putting anything into your savings account into the bank. So I love it. Choose your hard. What I'd like to do, and just to reiterate, I just want to, and then I just want to just kind of get you to talk about where people can find you and get the book and everything like that. We have to have a part two, by the way, of this podcast, because I have so many more things
Yeah.
that I want to ask you, but I just want to go through. I'm just going to I want to just read the chapter titles, the 12 steps: admitting we are powerless, coming
Mhm.
to believe, making a decision to turn it over, taking a fearless moral inventory, admitting our wrongs, becoming ready, humbly asking for removal, making a list and becoming willing, making direct amends, continued personal inventory, seeking through prayer and meditation, and the last one, carrying the message. These are beautiful 12 steps that really gives people a guide. And before we ask Dr. Hart exactly where we can find all our stuff, and you guys really need to go out and get this book. I will tell you, one of the hardest things to do, especially if you're kind of like me and just so many other people, and is asking for help. It is just admitting to yourself that you need help. And I've seen it so many times. And again, forget my own, like, personal circle. When I just talk to people every day, all these patients, so many of them are afraid to ask for help because they feel like they're going to be judged. They might not want their spouse to know that they're really in a dark time. They feel ashamed themselves. Or the biggie, and you talk about this a lot, is we feel like we have to be like so resilient from nowhere that we are almost taught that we have to fight the battle ourselves, because otherwise we're weak, we're less than. Why is everyone else out there? Why is Goggins running, 260 miles and I literally can't put my shoes on, and walk, a quarter mile? And so you start judging yourself more and you go down the spiral. I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you as a physician that has treated tens of thousands of people, if you are in a bad place, ask for help. And you don't have to get to the point where you call and make, like you don't need like right away personal coach. You just start with getting a book like
Yeah.
this, just saying like, you got to start somewhere. You don't have to do it on your own. There is zero shame in being in a bad place. We've all been there, and all the people you think have not been there, they've been there. They just don't talk about it, or you just don't know about it. So on that note, how can people find your book? Where do they look you up if they have questions? Is there somewhere where they can, like where do you prefer to kind of get contacted?
Yeah, I'm definitely the most active on Instagram regarding social media platforms, and which is Dr. Samantha Hart, Harte. And so if you write to me, I will write back. It's not a bot. It's actually me. I respond to all my messages. And also on my website, which is drsamanthahart.com, you can really learn all about me. You can click to order the book there or just look it up
Mm,
on Amazon, but also just really take a deep dive into the different things that I do. And on every page of the website, I did this on purpose, is a very easy book a discovery call mechanism. And
oh,
that is
nice.
my favorite way. When people really connect to something I say, I much prefer that we speak on the phone and I can look them in the face,
Love it.
do more of what I just did with you with them, because that is where really all the healing happens and the shame dissipates.
Yeah, I think that, I think it's just so important for people to understand that how hard it is out here, and that people like you are out there that are pouring their heart and soul telling their own stories so that other people, again, can get out of it and or never get to that situation because they have that framework that they might not have had. They're from that broken home. They've had that horrible health thing, they have. And I can just tell you, we got to kind of get a video of you just doing like make it like a 20-minute generalized thing. I give it to all my patients when they come and have surgery. Just keep them resilient, keep them.
I have a virtual course. It's called
Nice.
In the Heart, which is an adaptation from my book. So it
Wonderful.
literally is 12 modules with a downloadable PDF for each. So, because a lot of people who read my book were like, now I need to go back and actually do the work. And I was like, I need to create something that's online, that's
Yes.
digital,
Love it.
purchase first. So literally, there's that too that
So
people can.
we can send them to your course. Well, listen, this has been amazing. Hopefully we can get you back on the program. I know they'll be asking. This has been a great episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast with Dr. Samantha Harte. I see the Peloton in the back. That makes me think, man, I got to get I got to get to that. I do the bike with the oxygen though. Exercise while under oxygen therapy. It's amazing for your VO2 max. It really is. I mean, it's just amazing for cellular health. On that note, the people that follow me, they know all about exercise while under oxygen therapy. I just repeat the same stuff over and over like a broken record. Listen, if it works, it works. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you love this episode. Please go get the book, and please contact Dr. Harte if you have any further questions.